I knew something was off the moment I got the calendar invite labeled Vision Alignment Session. That's corporate code for "We're about to ruin your decade." The coffee in the break room was still hot, my inbox blissfully quiet, and then, boom. Tyler strolled in like he owned the place. Technically, he kind of did. Founder's son. Fresh out of whatever Ivy League petri dish breeds these overconfident man-children with names like Ty and Blaze. His handshake felt like shaking hands with a baked rotisserie chicken. Too much oil, not enough substance. I'd been with the company for 14 years. 14. Through acquisition hell, budget sequestration, reorgs, and that 1 year we had to prove to the DCAA that a used Keurig wasn't excessive overhead. I kept us clean. No findings. 0 flags. I was the one who translated legislative sludge into protocols people could actually follow. While other departments held compliance offsites, I was here, printing binders for audits, reviewing subcontractor clearance forms, chasing down missing certifications like a bloodhound with a badge. Which is why I nearly laughed when he clicked through his presentation. Yes, a presentation in our first leadership meeting, and said, "We'll be rethinking compliance from a proactive automation-first lens." I've heard enough consultant bingo to know what that really means. We're replacing brains with buzzwords. Tyler had this smug little chuckle after every slide, like even he didn't believe what he was saying, but was too proud to stop performing. And he made sure to emphasize, "No offense, Jennifer. We just think your methods are a little too analog for the new direction. No offense." Like telling a firefighter, "No offense," before replacing them with a garden hose and a prayer. By the way, real quick before we go any deeper into this disaster, if you're enjoying the story, it'd really help the team if you hit that subscribe button and gave it a like. Most people listen without subscribing, and yeah, I get it. You're driving, folding laundry, or pretending to work, but it genuinely keeps this kind of storytelling alive. Okay, back to the flaming wreckage. I didn't react, didn't protest. I just crossed my arms and asked, "Is this a formal role change?" HR looked at me like I'd asked if penguins get dental. "It's transitional," they said. "We're just exploring synergies." Synergies. God help me. Within 48 hours, my office had been reassigned to someone named Marcy, who wore her conference lanyards after the conference, and I'd been moved to the front desk. The front desk. "Reception is strategic," Tyler said with a wink. "First impressions matter." I smiled, nodded, and printed a fresh copy of my employment contract. Here's the thing about being underestimated. It's exhausting when you're young, but when you're seasoned, and make no mistake, I was seasoned like a cast iron skillet. It's fuel. I watched the chaos from behind that desk like a queen in exile. People whispered, interns side-eyed me like I had some tragic backstory, and Tyler walked around like he'd invented oxygen. He replaced our in-house counsel with some guy he met at a networking event who called himself Cody with a K, and every document that came out of legal read like it had been drafted by someone who skimmed an article about the Constitution once in 8th grade. Meanwhile, I quietly maintained the compliance files. Not out of obligation, but because I knew the DCAA renewal was coming. I knew that contract language better than I knew my own Netflix password. I was still listed as the primary contract officer of record. You don't just yank that title away with a smug email and a smile. And crucially, my CPO certification, Certified Procurement Officer, was due for renewal. I told my assistant Meredith to prep the forms. She nodded, said, "On it." Then she promptly forgot. I saw the email come through. Reminder, CPO certification expiring in 30 days. I hovered over the link, thought about it, then looked out the glass office wall at Tyler pretending to explain defense spending to the founder's old secretary like she hadn't lived through 3 administrations. And for the first time in 14 years, I didn't click the link. Tyler called it a one-on-one, but it felt more like a performance review written by a chatbot on Red Bull. I walked into the glass-walled conference room at 9:01 a.m. sharp, not because I respected him, but because I wanted to see if he'd flinch. He didn't. just grinned like a smug possum, gesturing to the chair across from him like he was granting me a royal audience. "Jennifer," he began, lacing his fingers like a discount guru, "you've been here a long time. A pillar. A legacy player." Legacy. Like I was a dusty Windows 95 machine. But as we move toward a leaner, tech-empowered model, we're streamlining roles that are, well, let's say high certification, low velocity. I stared, said nothing. Just let him dig. "We've decided," he continued, tapping his iPad like that made it official, "to transition you into a more forward-facing role. Reception, you'll still be interfacing with critical stakeholders, just in a new context." Reception. The man just demoted a federal compliance officer to professional door greeter and acted like he'd handed me a promotion. I glanced at the hallway window, where a janitor was mopping the floor with more dignity than this conversation held. He must have sensed the silence was getting heavy, because he pushed forward. "Look, your alphabet soup of certifications," he waved vaguely like my degrees were contagious. "It's impressive, but the truth is, AI can handle 80% of compliance workflows now. Risk logs, audit trails, threshold validations, it's all plug and play. We've built a new contract ops team that's agile, cross-functional, and way less, legacy." I smiled, which, for me, was basically pulling the pin on a silent grenade. "That's a significant role shift," I said evenly. "I'll need that in writing." His smirk faltered. "Well, it's more of a fluid reassignment," he said. "HR will loop you in on the logistics." I did a slow nod. "Great. Then I'll wait to see the new reporting structure and responsibilities documented." That was the first crack. Tyler didn't like people asking for things in writing. Paper trails scare amateurs. But I wasn't just documenting, I was documentation. My entire career had been built on paper trails, cross-referenced and time-stamped. HR sent nothing that day. Nothing the next day, either. Just vague emails filled with interim support needs and temporary cross-functional allocation. Translation: we're trying to demote you without legally triggering a demotion. By the end of the week, my system access had started quietly evaporating. The folder I'd built for federal grant renewal? Gone. My edit privileges in the contract management system? Revoked. I couldn't even log into the platform I personally selected 6 years ago. Meanwhile, the contract ops team was a walking liability buffet. One of them asked me if FR clauses were like tax codes but for supplies. Another confused a debarment list with a delivery manifest. These were the people now managing our $340 million pipeline. I watched them from the front desk, smiled when they stumbled past, then flipped open the leather-bound notebook I'd started carrying. It wasn't for show. It was my record. Day 3. Access to cars revoked. Legal says interim restructuring. Day 6. Tyler's frat buddy, Cody with a K, drafts memo assigning me as support staff, external relations. Day 8. Still no formal title change. Meredith asks if I want to renew my CPO. I say, let's wait and see. It was like watching a car crash unfold in slow motion, except I knew the precise moment the brakes had been cut. They thought I was irrelevant. Background noise. But every mistake they made looped back to one immutable fact. My name was still on the contract. And the DCAA doesn't care about your PowerPoint. They care about who holds the certification. The beautiful part? I didn't need to sabotage anything. They were doing it for me. The receptionist desk gave me a front row seat to the unraveling of everything I'd spent the last 14 years building. And I took notes like a sports commentator at the world's slowest train wreck. The new contract ops team had set up shop in the corner conference room, which they'd inexplicably renamed the Innovation Hub, complete with a whiteboard that still had the phrase, "Who owns risk?" scrawled across it like a philosophical riddle they were too scared to answer. Every day, a new wave of interns and wide-eyed junior analysts stumbled past me clutching compliance binders upside down, asking questions like, wait, do we still have to follow the old federal forms? And what's a DFARS again? One particularly nervous-looking engineer leaned close while waiting for his visitor badge and muttered, They don't even know what DFARS is. Like he was confessing a murder. I just smiled and handed him his badge. The thing about being removed from power is that everyone forgets you ever had it. They think you've been scrubbed from the system, wiped clean like an old dry erase board. But unlike Tyler's Instagram feed, federal databases don't forget. I still had my login credentials for the Defense Contract Audit Agency portal. They'd never been revoked, because, officially, nothing had changed. And so, on a quiet Thursday morning, while sipping burnt break room coffee and pretending to care about a malfunctioning badge printer, I logged in. My name was still there. Jennifer Sloan, Primary Contract Officer of Record, active on Contract 34A72D. I clicked the Renewal tab, and there it was. My CPO certification, the keystone of our compliance position, was set to expire in 19 days. 19 days. That's when it clicked. Not a trap I had to build, not a revenge plan I needed to orchestrate. The trap already existed. It had been written into the contract language 2 years ago, during the last round of federal updates. It stated that all active contractors must maintain an up-to-date primary contract officer holding current CPO certification, or the entire contract becomes subject to immediate suspension upon review. And there was only one name in that clause. Mine. I hovered my mouse over the renewal button. It would have taken 30 seconds. A few clicks, a payment, a digital signature, and that would have been it. Back to status quo. Smooth sailing for Tyler's merry band of incompetence. But instead, I let the cursor drift, closed the tab, and leaned back in my chair. The office around me buzzed with artificial urgency. Printouts stapled in the wrong order, interns sprinting with coffee orders, consultants whispering in corners about clean frameworks. I watched it all like a still painting of chaos. Every mistake they made was another stroke on the canvas. And I wasn't going to lift a finger to fix it. Tyler, meanwhile, was busy prepping for his big compliance review like he was about to pitch a startup on Shark Tank. I overheard him telling legal that he wanted to dazzle the feds with his presentation-led narrative. His version of compliance prep was printing PowerPoints in landscape mode and wearing a tighter dress shirt. He strutted around the office with the swagger of someone who's never been audited and thinks material breach is just a fancy way to say, oops. He even called a team huddle where he made everyone repeat, "We're audit ready," like it was a damn cult chant. Nobody noticed that I was quietly printing a personal copy of the contract terms and placing it in my desk drawer. Nobody asked why I was suddenly tracking timestamps and document edit histories. Nobody noticed that Meredith, now unofficially reporting to Cody with a K, was visibly sweating as she tried to answer basic questions about PCO responsibilities. I overheard her ask someone if retroactive certifications were a thing. They're not. And the DCAA takes that kind of creative thinking very personally. Back at the desk, I flipped open my notebook. Day 12. Found expired visitor log from supplier with no NDA on file. Day 13. Legal requested my signature on updated budgetary annex. Declined. Day 14. Audit date confirmed. 3 weeks out. 19 days became 18, then 17. Each one ticked by like a slow drumbeat, leading up to something none of them could hear. But I heard it. Loud and clear. This wasn't sabotage. Sabotage requires action. This was physics. A weight left dangling for too long eventually falls, and I made sure the rope stayed still. It was like someone had bet Tyler $1 million. He couldn't run a full federal contract operation using only interns, espresso, and motivational quotes from LinkedIn. Suddenly, the office was crawling with consultants from firms I'd never heard of. Glossy-haired types in aggressively slim pants and mismatched socks, clicking around on MacBooks like they could manifest a compliance plan by sheer force of jargon. They kept saying things like, "Let's sandbox the risk matrix," and "We're repackaging the audit narrative to align with strategic optics." I watched one of them try to convert a vendor history log into a pie chart using Excel's auto-format tool and then present it to legal like it was a revelation. Legal actually clapped. I'm not kidding. There was applause. For a pie chart. Meanwhile, the actual documentation, the stuff that mattered, looked like it had been hit by a hurricane. My formerly bulletproof audit folders were now rebranded into color-coded binders with titles like DCAA Storytelling Assets and Contract Journey Map. They'd even added a tab called Our Culture, which included a quote from Tyler: "Integrity is just efficiency with morals." I wrote that one down. It felt like something I'd need for a deposition someday. Interns were running around with badge printers, struggling to load paper, asking me where the audit summary printouts were kept. I handed one of them a stack of documents and asked, "Do you know what a finding is?" He blinked, said, "Like treasure?" Tyler, in his element now, strutted into a Monday morning exec meeting with a full slideshow titled "Rethinking Compliance, the Startup Mindset." First slide, a GIF of a rocket launch. Second slide, a picture of him smiling next to our contractor sign-in log. "We're shaving compliance costs by 60%, he announced proudly. "Leaner, meaner, and way more scalable." I didn't know you could scale fraud, but I guess we were about to find out. At this point, the only thing holding the company together was the illusion that someone, somewhere, had a plan. Then I got the message. It popped up in my inbox while I was pretending to troubleshoot the lobby printer. A simple LinkedIn message from an agent I'd worked with before. Sharp guy, quiet, respected. "Just confirming you'll be attending the renewal review?" There it was. My heart didn't skip. It didn't race. It just clicked, like a key sliding into a lock. He wasn't asking out of courtesy. He was confirming what he already knew. My name was still in the system. I was still the primary contract officer. I was the face they expected to see across that table. I paused for a moment, looked at the blinking cursor. Thought about Tyler's last team huddle, where he high-fived someone for making a compliance checklist in Canva. Then I typed back, "I'll be present." That was all. Nothing more. I shut the message and returned to my coffee. Let them print their glossy reports and string together more buzzwords than a TEDx pitch. Let them build their house of laminated cards. I wasn't lifting a finger to stop them. Because the thing about federal audits is, you can't bluff your way through them with infographics and inspirational quotes. You need receipts. And unfortunately for them, I was the receipt. Every minute they spent rehearsing that presentation, every document they optimized, every shortcut they took, thinking no one would notice, it all fed into a system that did not care about style points. And that system still had my name in bold. It's funny how fast they forget who built the house when they're busy trying to remodel it with glitter glue and buzzwords. Tyler, in his infinite genius, must have assumed that removing me from the organizational chart also removed me from every email thread, Slack channel, and shared drive I ever touched. But legacy systems are a stubborn thing, like mold under laminate. And Tyler, bless him, didn't know enough about anything to clean house properly. So I sat there, day after day, at the receptionist desk, nameplate and all, silently watching email chains from my former life roll in. Contracts, renewals, audit schedules, escalations. The whole compliance machinery now run by people whose deepest experience with federal regulations was likely downloading TurboTax once. At first, it was entertaining. I watched them fumble through my old SOPs, misread internal deadlines, and send urgent messages to legal asking if a vendor's expiring clearance could be overridden manually. Spoiler, no. But then, somewhere around day 12, things turned from amusing to quietly dangerous. Tyler had assigned my duties, to a junior analyst named Mason, who still used Comic Sans in emails. Poor kid looked like he'd been chosen for a group project and just realized the rest of the team had dropped the class. I could see it in his eyes. The late nights, the silent cries into Google Docs, the growing suspicion that this opportunity was a trap wrapped in a bonus check. One afternoon, he rushed past the front desk, sweat beading at his hairline, binder half open. "Hey, Jennifer." He paused, unsure if saying my name was allowed in Tyler's brave new org chart. "Quick question. What does this clause mean about certified authority for renewal filings? Because, legal says we're good, but then procurement said we need a named signatory, and I raised an eyebrow. nodded once, said nothing, and he just stood there, flinching in the silence, before shuffling away. I didn't have to answer. That clause was the trap, and the trap didn't need explaining. It just needed time. Emails kept flooding in. One particularly rich thread had Cody with a K, suggesting that Mason borrow Jennifer's signature for a compliance form. Not forge. Borrow. Like a cup of sugar. Tyler replied with, LOL, if it works, it works. Every time someone hit reply all, they forgot I was still sitting there, sipping coffee and reading every word. The whole office had turned into a poorly written thriller where the villain monologues with the mic still hot, but I said nothing. Didn't forward, didn't warn. Just logged each misstep in my notebook. Then came the phone call. It was just past 6 p.m. Most of the staff had gone home. The lobby was quiet. My phone buzzed. The founder. I hadn't spoken to him since the handoff to Tyler, and I nearly let it ring out of spite. But curiosity won. Jennifer? He said, his voice half warm, half worried. Hey, I just wanted to check. Are you still handling the 34A renewal? For the DCAA? There it was. Not suspicion. Not anger. Confusion. I stared out the front window for a moment, watched a pigeon land on a cracked parking lot line, then replied calmly, I was. I'm not. He was silent. You're not? He finally said, like the words didn't fit in his mouth. But your name's still... I know, I said, and let the silence hang like a noose. HR never formalized the change. So technically, yes, I'm still listed. But as of now, I'm just the receptionist. He stammered a bit, said something about following up with Tyler. Then the line went dead. After that, no one really looked me in the eye. Tyler walked by a few times over the next few days, laughing too loud at nothing, dragging consultants behind him like a wedding train. But when his eyes met mine, even for a flicker, I saw it. Doubt. That little twitch in the jaw that says, what did I miss? And I smiled. Because I wasn't hiding. I was just present. Present like a shadow in a locked room. Present like a fact they chose to ignore until it started knocking. Present like my certification still wasn't renewed. The clock kept ticking, and they kept handing me the keys to their own funeral. The day before the audit hit like a late-stage caffeine crash, sudden, ugly, and loud. I just sat down at the front desk with my usual sad little cup of break room sludge when I heard it. The tone. It started in legal, of course. First, the rushed footfalls. Then the sharp whispering. Then that particular kind of forced calm that smells like panic wearing a necktie. Tyler had apparently asked for a final audit checklist the night before so he could lead the review like a CEO in training, which is hilarious considering the only thing he ever led was a TikTok workshop on team building. Legal, trying to play catch-up, opened the compliance file to polish the contact sheet. It was then that the paralegal, bright kid named Anna, finally blinked and said aloud, Wait, where's Jennifer's active certification? Silence. Then chaos. See, federal systems don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your org chart, or your LinkedIn title, or your shiny laminated slides. They care about expiration dates, registration IDs, and system logs. And somewhere between backslapping Tyler into power and handing my responsibilities to an analyst who still confuses FOIA with FOMO, they'd all failed to realize something vital. My CPO certification had expired. Last night. Midnight. Locked and time-stamped by the Federal Registry. It wasn't pending. It wasn't flexible. It was gone. I heard legal tearing through the hallway, binder pages flapping like panicked wings. People were on phones, frantic typing. Someone knocked over the water cooler. HR's door slammed. Loud footsteps made their way straight toward me. HR Director Melissa, usually cool, usually polished, looked like she'd just sprinted through a sprinkler made of red tape and bad decisions. She leaned over the front desk and hissed, Jennifer, we need a moment. Of course, I said, standing slowly, straightening my blouse like I'd been waiting for this exact moment. Because I had. They led me into a conference room like I was a visiting diplomat. 3 people were already seated: Melissa from HR, Anna from legal, and Mason, the human stress ball Tyler had appointed to run compliance. All 3 had the expression of people who just realized they were standing on a frozen lake and heard the first crack. Melissa leaned in, smiled. Too wide. So, small hiccup. It appears your CPO certification expired last night. I nodded. That's correct. She glanced at the others. And, since your name is still listed as the primary contract officer, totally understandable oversight, of course, we're hoping you can just go ahead and renew it. Today, as a favor. I almost laughed. I didn't. I just folded my hands. I would, I said, voice calm as a confession booth, but I no longer hold that position. Remember? You reassigned me. Anna from legal cleared her throat. There was no formal demotion. Correct, I interrupted. No formal demotion. No formal reassignment. No updated reporting chain. No written HR notice. Nothing in the system. Which means I'm still the primary officer of record. But I'm not authorized to act as such. Per your own language, by the way. Mason looked like he might cry. Melissa tried again. Jennifer, be reasonable. You can still renew. It's just a lapse. No, I said. It's a procedural void. My access was revoked. My duties reassigned. And I have the emails to prove it. Anna pinched the bridge of her nose. Backdating won't work, she muttered. The federal timestamp's already locked. Melissa leaned forward, desperate now. Then help us. Please. We can reinstate? I smiled. You'll want to speak to legal about that. After all, I'm just the receptionist. The words hit like a gavel. I stood, collected my notepad, and walked out as calmly as I walked in. Back to the desk. Back to my quiet seat, with the best view in the house. The audit was less than 24 hours away, and they'd just realized the floor beneath their glossy rebrand wasn't floor at all. It was quicksand, shaped like my signature, and they were already neck-deep. Audit day dawned crisp and smug. The office smelled like dry erase markers, cologne, and desperation masked under citrus-scented optimism. I got there an hour early, dressed in the same navy blue blazer I'd worn to every DCAA renewal for the last decade, the one with the faint coffee stain on the inside hem, the one that meant business. But instead of heading upstairs to conference room B like I used to, I took my seat at the front desk, the receptionist desk, my kingdom now. The office was buzzing. Consultants swarmed like bees around a hive made of PowerPoints and fragile egos. Mason looked like he'd skipped sleep for a week. Tyler floated by with a double espresso and a too-white smile, patting shoulders, barking encouragement, repeating the phrase, "Today's just a formality, folks," like a cult leader reassuring his flock the spaceship was still coming. I sipped my coffee. The first external badge was issued to a man in a gray suit with a DCAA pin. His name was Glenn. We'd worked together twice before, quiet, efficient, all business. He met my eyes, nodded once, and accepted the visitor sticker without a word. But I saw the flicker. He recognized the face handing him the badge. He didn't ask what I was doing at the front desk. He didn't have to. The room upstairs filled quickly. Tyler, Mason, legal, 3 consultants, 2 fresh-faced analysts who looked like they were about to pitch a startup, and Cody with a K, who wore a blazer over a t-shirt that read, "Compliance is a mindset." He tried to fist bump the auditor. Glenn blinked slowly and sat down. Tyler strutted past me on the way to the elevator, holding his laptop like it was a weapon. "You can sit this one out, Jennifer," he said, not even slowing. "We've got this." I gave him a tight smile. "Of course you do." Then I watched the elevator close behind him. The next 20 minutes moved in slow motion. I could hear the occasional muffled laugh from upstairs, chairs shifting, the soft squeak of whiteboard markers. I kept glancing at the elevator. Nothing. Then it came. A shift in the air. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a pause. Everything above me went still, like the sound had been sucked out of the building. Then, footsteps. Fast ones. The elevator dinged. Opened. Mason stepped out pale as drywall. He walked past me without looking, clutching a binder with a death grip. Behind him, slower, came Glenn. His face unreadable. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I reached for my coffee, gripped it, didn't blink. More footsteps followed. Tyler? Legal? One consultant looking like she might throw up. Nobody spoke. They moved like chess pieces, suddenly realizing the game was played in a different language. Tyler's face was all angles now, his smile gone, his tan suddenly 2 shades lighter. He walked past me with none of the usual performance. The air hung thick. Finally, I heard the low murmur of Glenn's voice in the conference room. Not angry, not loud, just decisive. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught the tone. And I knew that tone better than I knew my own reflection. It was the tone of realization. The kind of tone people use when they open a folder expecting a golden ticket and instead find a bomb with a clock already ticking. And I sat there, sipping from my mug, the heat blooming against my fingers. No need to gloat. No smirk. No satisfaction dance. Just quiet anticipation. Because I didn't need to destroy anything. I only had to wait for them to read the fine print. They say silence is golden. In that room, it was a wrecking ball. Glenn opened the binder with the calm of a man reading someone else's obituary. He flipped past the fluff, past the compliance culture graphics, and Tyler's glossy headshot, straight to the real paperwork. You could always count on Glenn for that. He wasn't here for TED Talk nonsense or synergy decks. He was here for names, dates, credentials. And then he said it. Primary Contract Officer, Jennifer Sloan. He didn't raise his voice, didn't ask a question, just read the line aloud like it was scripture. The room went still. I couldn't see their faces from downstairs, but I could feel it. The shared realization. The stomachs sinking in unison. Tyler tried to speak. I know that because his voice carries when he's nervous, and I caught the sharp intake of breath right before he said, "Actually?" But Glenn held up a hand. Just a simple, quiet stop. And then came the kill shot. Her certification expired last week, and she is the only listed PCO on this contract. As of midnight tonight, your $340 million federal contract is void. Boom. I didn't hear anything for a second after that, not because the room was silent, but because I was. Everything inside me just stopped, like an orchestra cutting out mid-note, letting the echo carry the weight. Then chaos. Legal tore through binders, like answers might magically appear under a sticky note. Mason dropped his laptop bag. One of the consultants actually said the words, "Can we just update the system real quick?" And I swear, I heard Glenn mutter, "It's a federal database, not Google Docs." And then, the voice. The founder, dialed in from whatever overpriced vacation compound he'd exiled himself to, exploded through the speakerphone. "What the hell do you mean void? We just renewed last quarter. How is this? Tyler, what is this?" Tyler stammered something about oversight, then something about HR transitions, then tried to throw out the word provisional, like it was a shield. But it was too late. The wall had cracked, and water was flooding in. That's when I stood up. I'd been sitting at the desk, watching the elevator display blink numbers like a countdown to detonation. I smoothed my blazer, tucked my notebook under my arm, and walked quietly down the corridor. I could feel the change in the air as I got closer to the room, like walking into a place where the storm had already hit. I stepped through the door without a word. Every eye turned to me. Tyler looked like he'd seen a ghost. I walked past him, past legal, past the still spinning head of HR, and right up to Glenn. "Mr. Peterson," I said, "thank you for your time today." He nodded once, eyes steady. Mrs. Sloan. I pulled a single envelope from my notebook. This is my formal resignation, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Effective immediately. Tyler opened his mouth, but I turned to legal. I've retained a copy of all correspondence documenting my removal from active duties and revocation of platform access. If you'd like me to testify regarding the timeline, I'll be available by subpoena only. Dead silence. Even the founder on speakerphone didn't say a word. I walked to the door, turned back, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself the smallest, most professional smile. I hope your new team works out. Then I left. Not stormed out. Left. Because after midnight, there wouldn't be an office to return to. By 10:32 p.m. that night, the lights at the office blinked out like someone had unplugged the entire operation from the wall. Not metaphorically, literally. Federal lockdown protocols had been triggered the moment the audit notes hit the system. Emails froze mid-send. Contracts vanished into digital quarantine. Every badge access revoked. Every terminal locked out. The $340 million pipeline Tyler had paraded like a toy train set was now a federally sealed evidence locker. Someone from the Office of Inspector General had already flagged the renewal discrepancy, and with my name stamped in every clause that mattered, the system did exactly what it was designed to do: shut them down before they could do real damage. The building itself stood silent. Dead. Like the corpse of a company that hadn't realized it was already bleeding out. By midnight, the founder's private jet had landed, unscheduled. He came barreling through the glass front doors in jeans and a windbreaker, his face the color of unpaid taxes. He didn't ask for a tour, didn't call a meeting. He stormed straight into the executive suite, where the ops team had been corralled like panicked cattle in business casual. Tyler didn't make it past sunrise. He was escorted out with a single box of belongings and a legal envelope thicker than his resume. His name was wiped from the internal directory before the coffee machines rebooted. The contract ops team? Suspended. Pending investigation. Every Slack channel, every shared doc, every video call, audited. The consultants evaporated into voicemail. Cody with a K posted a vague LinkedIn status about learning through adversity and was never heard from again. And me? I wasn't there for any of it. I was at a quiet bar 4 blocks away, sipping a bourbon neat in a booth by the window. The kind of place with no TV, no music, just the soft clink of glass on wood, and the occasional muttered story from a bartender who'd seen too much and judged too little. I didn't feel rage, didn't feel smug. I just felt still. Like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. My phone buzzed once, then again. 2 recruiters, one from a defense contractor I'd audited back in 2017, another from a firm that handled security clearances for federal subcontractors. The third buzz came from a name I didn't recognize, but the message was clear. We'd like to meet. We've been following your work. I set the phone down. Didn't answer. Not yet. The bartender walked by, glanced at the empty glass. Another? I nodded. Yeah? One more? He poured. No questions. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. A couple walked by, laughing. Somewhere down the block, a siren flared and faded. I raised my glass, looked out the window, and said to no one in particular, needing my certification was the only thing they got right. Because in the end, they'd built their empire on assumption, and I just let it collapse. No sabotage, no schemes, just precision. One expired line, one ignored name, and the whole damn thing crumbled. Perfectly.